My mother, grandfather, some of my closest friends, mentors, many of the people I love and respect in my life are gardeners. Whether it's just one potted plant or a whole yard, they all seem to differ in regards to what's in their garden or how or why they garden it. But what they all seem to share is a love for nurturing and finding a beauty in being a part of something's growth. We all have aspects of ourselves that we plant or are planted. Why shouldn't we look for that same beauty in ourselves? I'm Edward. A little about what I do. I'm in the comp sci department here. I work in Gen AI, biotech, startup, a bunch of other buzzwords I'm not going to say for the rest of the time I have up here. All you need to know is that I have a job where my voice is different when I'm on a Zoom call. Look, I'm lucky and grateful to be able to do what I do, but the truth is when I'm not doing that work, when I'm not thinking about work that's driven by others or financial needs or social norms, what I'm truly thinking about is my little garden, my hobbies. And the two flowers I'm growing in this garden are basketball and art. I think everybody has a different definition of what a hobby is. I think for some people it's just whatever they do in their free time. Maybe it's just whatever you do for fun. It's a skill, a craft, somewhere you go. It is different for everybody. But what I think it is at the core is that it's something that you make the choice to do with your own time. And that it's something that makes you happy and fulfilled. I think with enough time and happiness and fulfillment, hobbies are a beautiful vehicle for you to understand yourself and your growth. And what I hope to tell you about that journey is what I've learned from basketball and art, and I hope that can be of some value to you. Sometimes things grow because they're planted, and sometimes things grow because the seeds, the soil, the sun, and the water meet at the right place and at the right time. For me, basketball and art started at around the same time for not exactly the best reasons. I was kind of a hefty kid growing up. And one day at a doctor's appointment, I think it was 6th grade, doctor sat my mom down and was like, yeah, this kid is getting a little too chunky, he's got to cut back on the food, which I wasn't going to do, or pick up a sport or something. And I didn't know what sport to pick, but at the time I was head over heels for this girl in the middle school. And she said that her type was basketball players. So that's why I picked up basketball. I remember one time I was talking to her, and I knew she watched a lot of NBA, so I asked her, who's your favorite basketball player? And I was really surprised because her answer was Troy Bolton from High School Musical. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but if you've watched any basketball, you can tell that Zac Efron is, at the time, not exactly super comfortable with the ball. And so I knew that she watched the NBA, so I was curious, why him? And what she said was that, and I quote, she liked that he wasn't just any basketball meathead, that he was somebody with an expressive or emotional and artistic side. And that's why I picked up art. And so the two seeds of my flowers were planted. And as I began to spend every free second I had doing these two things, I felt the seeds begin to sprout. When I had the option, partially doing it for her, but the truth was it felt incredibly self-affirming to know that I had made the choice to do something that I wanted to do with my own time, and that no matter how tough school or social life or adolescence was, I could look forward to tending to these two sprouts in the peace of my garden. As middle school came to a close, things began to take shape. I lost a lot of weight, and I was a starter on the middle school team, and I was playing well in games, and she would come and see me play. At the same time, I realized I loved pencil and pen drawing, and that year, on her birthday, as a gift to her, I drew a picture of her dog that I was honestly quite proud of, and she loved it. I had achieved things that I had set out to do, and for the first time, through this achievement, it felt like my flowers were blooming. I got into an academically intense high school that I was incredibly lucky to be able to accept through a program I was grateful to get. And I was really excited to pursue my hobbies there, but I was in for a rude awakening. After just 1 year on the freshman team, I realized that I was not nearly as good at basketball in comparison to others around me as I was in middle school, and I had little to no hope to continue. Coaches, friends, my parents all urged me to quit. And though I'd play some basketball games and pickup from time to time, I ultimately took their advice. Similarly with art, I was just not nearly good enough at the time to make it a focal point of my resume, and I phased it out of my life as well. In the Bay Area, where I grew up, academic competitiveness was incredibly intense, and college application viability seemed to be the only thing that mattered. But ultimately, I was the one who let that pressure get to my sense of self. I was incredibly lucky and grateful to get into NYU. Funny enough, I actually started out as a pre-med student, shout out Katie. And yeah, as she alluded to, I stepped into an environment full of highly successful, driven, passionate people, and I watched equally amazing peers from my high school go on to their subsequent colleges and do amazing things. I felt that I had to do something worthy of their respect, that I had to push myself in a professional capacity, take my time seriously. There were clubs, there were e-board positions, internship apps, job apps, and in the middle of it all, I took time away from school to do business development with my family, and then I started the EM team. These things just felt more important, and after them, I just didn't have the time or the energy for basketball and art, and the flowers that had meant so much to my garden began to wilt under my absence and neglect. Weekdays were school, weeknights were work, weekend days, lab, weekend nights, internship apps, job apps. I just could not sustain a healthy routine, physically, mentally, emotionally. And when COVID happened, EMTing was already a tough stretch into the lowest point of my life. With work, every failure felt like I was letting down people who had put their trust and respect into me. And in EMTing, with patients, just that year, it felt like we could not get a win. I either barely ate or I ate and drank too much. I couldn't sleep. I didn't see friends. And every second I had, I did whatever I could to numb the pain and guilt I felt from the EMT work. I wanted to be left alone, but the subsequent feeling of isolation from that was by far the hardest thing to contend with. As COVID came to a bit of a slow, I left EMT, and I found something else to throw myself into in the pursuit of a startup. But as startup work intensified and the balance of other things with it got more difficult, I realized I was feeling the same sense of emptiness, albeit distracted, that I felt before. I had no sense of direction, no clear idea of who I wanted to be, what my sense of self was. And I realized that the very decisions that had guided me for so long and the principles that had gone with them had left me incredibly unhappy and unfulfilled. And I had no idea what to do. A friend of mine who's really into plants once told me that if your plant is dying and you don't know what to do, the first thing you should try is repotting it. You can also try trimming it, wiping it, moving it, doesn't matter, as long as you make some kind of meaningful change to its environment. And I think for humans, at least for me, it's the same way. When you've lost your sense of direction, sometimes you just need to make any kind of change in order to find the right path. At the time, the only thing I really did for fun was just watch repeats of TV and play really stupid video games. And that year, I realized I needed to change. So I made two resolutions. Number one, I was going to exercise at least once a week. And number two, I was going to sign up for an art class. I found an online site where I could play pickup games with other people, and I would schedule it and try to go once a week. And I registered for a painting class because I realized that most of my favorite artworks were actually paintings. I just told myself that it'd be a win if I could get myself out of the apartment to my pickup game or my class for that week. And there was no pressure. Like if I really had a good excuse or reason for why I couldn't go, I would give myself that grace. Without that internal pressure or any perceived external scrutiny, I realized I was doing things solely for the sake of the enjoyment of them. And I began to fall in love again. One basketball game a week turned to two, turned to three, and soon I found myself practicing by myself for the first time since high school. And as I painted more and more, I realized I was putting more time into each painting than I had for any graded assignment, or frankly, some of my work assignments. With love, I began to regrow basketball and art, planting their roots firmly into a regular part of my routine and my budget, watering them with attention and time, shining them with the sunlight of joy and freedom. And as I felt these things, these flowers, blooming once again, I felt myself blooming again too. And the flowers are beautiful. When I play basketball, I feel free. I feel alive. I'm giving my all. I can run and jump and feel the freedom that movement gives you. Sometimes it's just you and the ball and the basket, practicing and visualizing every move, but it's at its best when it's you and your team playing against other opponents. You and your team with your individual play styles, playing together as one unit and one system. And your team and your opponents, divided by rivalry, but united by love for the game and passion on the court, and your desire to express that passion through winning, through your play. When I play in a game, all I can hear is the unspoken love for basketball, spoken so loudly and clearly through dribbling and sneaker squeaking and the ball going through the net. And when I draw or when I paint, I feel alive, I feel free, I'm in another world. I can make art as a way to express how I feel about the world around me. And if I can imagine something, I can convey it in a way through brush or pen. I can look at the world through art differently and find stories and ideas that I want to convey. But I can also feel a momentary tactile satisfaction, like a clean pen-made line sliding across a sheet of paper. When I do art, I feel like I can let my imagination wander and experience my sense of soul. But when I look upon the flowers of others, I realize that the more I know the beauty of my own, the more I can learn about the hands that tend their other gardens. When I look at someone play basketball, from how they prepare, what they look for in a game, what they practice on their own, I get a sense of their work ethic, their intensity, and their sense of soul. And when I look at someone's art, from where they place things, or the colors and lines they use, the boldness or the timidness, the neatness or the messiness, I can get a sense of how they view and appreciate the world around them, how they let their imagination wander. It's a window into their expression and their emotion and their passion. But what I've learned the most about doing art or basketball, every game or every piece, is myself. From basketball, I've learned how I face imposing obstacles, how I am as a teammate, how I find the fire within myself to push myself beyond my physical limits. And from art, I've learned, how I view the world around me, and that there is no limit to what I'm capable of interpreting and, conveying and imagining, and that every decision I make can be a creative one, and ultimately one that I can take ownership of. But the most important thing I think I've learned, and it's something I've learned from both of them, is that the head and the heart, logic and passion, are not conflicting or contradictory forces, but rather two sides of the same coin of intention and purpose. My head tells me to practice my dribbling or my finishing, because those are definitely my weak points, and tells me to do anatomy study or joint studies, because I want to draw people, and joints are the most expressive part. But my heart beats for the feeling of making a nice pass, hitting a well-practiced shot, or just making a piece of art that I can look back and say that was truly conveying of what I felt was beautiful. You need your head to be able to build the skills and set the groundwork for your heart to fully express itself. But without the direction and the passion that your heart gives you, you wouldn't have the drive to push, problem solving and skill building that your head is capable of. You need to water and tend the soil and mind the sunlight in order to grow a flower, but what's the point if you can't look upon that flower and find it beautiful? The journey to this point, this realization, was incredibly hard and painful, and I would not want to go through it again, but I'm very glad that it happened. The seeds were planted when I had a crush on a girl, and they sprouted in pursuit of her recognition. They withered and wilted under a long winter of isolation during COVID and EMT and pursuit of financial and professional validation. But when the spring came, brought by the wind and rain of attention and time, heralded by the sunlight of enjoyment and freedom, I realized that it had all been worth it, because I've been able to express the bloom of basketball and art for myself. Every pain and every hardship helped me cherish and appreciate every moment where I play basketball or I draw or paint and feel happiness and fulfillment. And as I progress and push myself and take on and face and overcome challenges, I realized that the beauty in it all is that there's always something else to it. There's always something more to push myself to, and that it never stops. And that the core of it is always something so simple and so beautiful. That when I play basketball, or when I draw or paint, I feel good, and I feel happy. And that when I make the time to do those things, despite other options, I'm making the choice to feel good or happy. And that if I do those things in a day, week, month, or year, I can look back, no matter how tough at that day, week, month, or year, and say that that time was better spent. I hope that you can look at my art or see me on the court and think not of comparison or utility or validation as I once did, but find the time and the energy for something that you love, to grow and cherish that love, no matter whatever shape or color that flower might be, in your own little garden. I want to thank the NYU TEDx team for their hard work. I want to thank my friends who I called for all their advice, Madison, Victor, Brendan, Natasha, for all the practice they helped me with, Kathleen and Subin for the amazing patience, advice, help they gave me, and thank you all for your time.